Hi, welcome to economics class. In the previous video, I looked at comparative advantage and absolute advantage in international trade. Today, I just want to deal with a question just to help you assimilate your understanding of comparative advantage and absolute advantages in relation to international trade. The two examples that we dealt with in the previous session all involved dealing with an output table. So what's an output table? This is where you are given output. In this particular video, I want to deal with a question involving inputs. So we are dealing with an input table. So let's look at the question and see how we can solve this question. The schedule below shows the number of labor hours spent on producing a unit of good X and Y in countries A and B. So you will notice that this is different style of asking the same thing about comparative advantage and absolute advantage. You are given labor hours instead of actual output. So what are you supposed to do? The first thing will be convert this table into an output table, or make estimates of what output will be if you were to use a given number of hours to produce actual units of a product. Required, they're saying state the theory of absolute advantage and comparative advantage theories. By the absolute and comparative advantage theories, respectively, could there be room for gainful trade between the two countries? Of course, explaining absolute advantage and comparative advantage should be easy for you by now. Absolute advantage means the country is producing cheaply or using fewer resources, or the country is efficient. Comparative advantage means the country is producing at a lower opportunity cost than the other country. So let's look at the second part of the question. Can there be gainful trade? The first thing you need to do is convert your input table into an output table. So how do you do that? So let's see how that can be done. So go to solution. Okay, so solution. For you to convert the input table into an output table, you need to make assumption. So we are going to make a simple assumption here. The assumption is, let's say we have a total of 100 hours as maximum for each industry. We have 100 hours for each industry as maximum. So let me clarify there. This is the maximum hours provided. So the question is, how many units can you produce of good X if you are using 1.5 hours and you have 100 hours on maximum? The number of units you can produce there will be 100 hours divided by 1.5. How many units can you produce for good Y in country A if you are using 2 hours to make 1 unit? If you are using 2 hours to make 1 unit and you have a maximum of 100 hours provided, you produce 50 units. So that's what we're going to do. So how will our output table look like? So estimated output will be 100 divided by 1.5. That's the output for good X. 100 divided by 1.5, you should get 67, rounded off figure. How many units of good Y are we going to produce in country A? It's 100 hours divided by 2 hours that we are spending to make 1 unit of a product. So we'll have a total of 50 units. For country B uses 5 hours to make 1 unit. So if we have 100 hours available, divided by 5, country B will only make 20 units of good X. Country B uses 4 hours to make 1 unit of good Y. If you have 100 hours available, the country will only manage to produce 25 units of good Y. So in terms of absolute advantage, is there gainful trade? Absolute advantage. So you say in terms of absolute advantage, country A is better in the production of both goods. So your country A is better in production of both goods. So will there be gainful trade? Your answer should be no, because country A is better. But when you consider comparative advantage, you will say, when you consider comparative advantage, you say yes, there will be gainful trade. Okay, so yes, there will be gainful trade if we consider comparative advantage. Absolute advantage, the answer will be no, there will be no gainful trade, because country A is better in terms of producing both goods. That is absolute advantage. Country A produces cheaply and efficiently for both goods. But when we consider comparative advantage, which looks at the opportune cost of shifting resources, there will be gainful trade. So the question is, how can we prove that? The answer is yes. So what are we supposed to do? Comparative advantage, you need to work out your opportunity cost table first, or what is called the comparative cost table. So this is our opportunity cost table. And what's the basis? If you remember very well, in the previous video, I gave you a clue on how you can calculate opportunity cost. But let's do it again. So comparative advantage for good X, let me write those initials for good X, will be equals to the quantity produced of good Y divided by the quantity produced of good X. That's what we learned in our previous video. Comparative advantage for good Y will be equals to quantity produced of good X divided by quantity produced of good Y. All right, so let's start with our country A. Comparative advantage for good X is the quantity produced of good Y, which is 50, divided by the quantity produced of good X, 67. How much will that be? That is going to be 0.75. If you tap that in your calculator. Comparative advantage for good X in country B is the quantity. The comparative advantage for good X in country B is the quantity of good Y produced in country B, which is 25 divided by the quantity of good X produced in country B, and that is going to be 1.25. Comparative advantage for GY, good Y, is the quantity of good X, which is 67 divided by the quantity of good Y, which is 50. That into your calculator should be 1.34. Comparative advantage for good Y in country B is the quantity of good X in country B, which is 20 divided by the quantity of good Y in country B, and that will be equals to 0.8. That is our opportunity cost table or comparative cost table calculated. Looking at the table, you will notice that country A has a better opportunity cost in the production of good X as compared to the production of good Y. Country B has a better opportunity cost in terms of good Y production as compared to good X production. What I mean by better opportunity cost is that the opportunity cost is lower. So what's the conclusion? What's the implication of this? Country A must specialize in producing good X. Country B must specialize in producing good Y. Will there be gainful trade? Let's look at that. If the country is specialized, so we get our output table down here. After specialization, what will be the output? What will be the new output? So we have noted that country A must specialize in good X, so country A must abandon production of good Y so that they can use all the resources to producing good X, and they will be able to double that production. So how much will that be? They produce 134. 134 is 67 times 2. Country B, we have concluded, country B must focus on the production of good Y, so country B must abandon the production of good X so that they can double good Y's output, and they'll be able to produce 50. So Wild's output will be 134 plus 50, and the total output should be 184. Is this better than what we had before? Let's look at our estimated outputs. Our estimated output showed that country A will produce 67 plus 50, that's 117, plus country B will produce 20 plus 25, that's going to be 45. Add that together, you should have 162. So 162 compared to 184, 184 is better. So there is gainful trade between the two countries. So what will be the gainful trade? Country A must focus on producing good X and import good Y from country B. Country B must focus on producing good Y and import good X from country A. Thank you so much. I just wanted to deal with that question just to help you consolidate on your understanding of comparative advantage and absolute advantage. I wish you all the best as you are preparing for your exam. Please do not relent. Put in your best effort. See you in the next video.